One Sunday. One Sunday, a storm blew in with green gold waves touching the sky, and coconut trees flinging about, dancing with ghost clouds, whispering lies. And the rain, sharp and white, painted words on the sand that changed my life. No stars, no moon, no songs or stories to find me and hide me, no brothers or sister or mommy or papi to hold me and calm me. The rain words fall in tunnels, leaving dark holes of truth of who I am. Who am I? Remind me, please, before this Sunday storm decides. Sunday was the day I loved best and the day I feared most. From the time I was 5 years old, I knew that on Sundays we were going to the beach. I also knew that on Sundays, Papi was going to get drunk. Very drunk, no matter what. Call it an end-of-the-week celebration, perhaps that is how Papi and his friends saw it, but Sunday was reserved for nothing but drinking, and they started at 9 o'clock in the morning. All over the porch they sat in their white sleeveless vests, with their thick brown arms slung over the backs of chairs. In the middle of the porch was a rickety table full of bottles of liquid gold shining in the sunlight. I sat high in my grigri tree after church, waiting for Mommy to take me, Roberto, and Angela to Sosua Beach. We would pack up our white plastic buckets with chicken and gravy and boiled bananas and walk down to the beach. While Mommy sat under the shade of the almond tree, Roberto, Angela, and I swam and jumped in the blue waves. Sometimes we would play catch on the beach if we found a stray ball that tourists had left behind. By the afternoon, our friends from school would be on the beach with their families, and I would play with them, having speed races on the sand and seeing who could jump the highest to touch the branches of the almond trees. Sunday was definitely the best day. Mommy smiled a lot, and Angela took time to teach me things out in the bright sunlight, like how to braid my wet, sandy hair. But as wonderful as Sundays could be, I lived in terror, because on some Sundays, on too many of them, as a matter of fact, Papi would decide to stroll down to the beach to meet us. By the time Papi arrived on Sosua Beach, he could hardly walk. He would stumble along, tripping over my friends' towels and baskets. He'd lurch toward me and hug me tightly, saying, "Do you love your Papi? How much do you love your Papi?" I was always surprised that the sun didn't slip behind a cloud or something to warn me of what was coming. It shone on bright as ever as I clutched to Papi to keep him and myself from falling in the sand. Finally, Roberta would appear to lead Papi over to the almond tree and help him sit next to Mommy. She never once uttered a word, not to him, not to us. She would gaze at the sea with a look on her face that made me think she wasn't even there with us. From his place next to Mommy, Papi would shout at us, demanding that we bring cups of rum and coke from friends' coolers. Fortified with that, he would shake Mommy by the shoulders, asking her, "¿Qué pasa, mi amor?" Through the years, Sundays began to get worse as Papi demanded louder and meaner, "¿Qué pasa, mi amor?" and Mommy never answered. As if to show her up, Papi would pull me close and he would ask again and again, "I'm your Papi, right, cariño? I'm your Papi." "Claro que sí," I would answer. "Of course, yes." And I tried to squirm away from his mutilating breath. But that wasn't good enough for Papi, and he would ask me again and again. I answered quickly each time, hoping he wouldn't get loud or do as he once did, walking up and down the beach, dragging me along, saying, "This is my daughter, my daughter." A few months after I had turned 12 and I finally learned to dance and braid my hair perfectly and write stories I was proud of to read out loud, I found out something that would change my Sundays forever. I was walking home from school one day when I saw a man dressed in all white sitting on top of a mule with a saddle. A real leather saddle. This was a big jefe, that was clear. The man looked me up and down. "You are Ana Rosa, see?" he asked me. I nodded my head. Before I could ask him who he was, he leaned down and handed me a 5-peso bill. I examined the red paper in amazement. So much money. I looked at him and he said, "Buy something nice, anything you want, and take your mommy her favorite yellow and black cake." I was so surprised that all I could say was, "Gracias, señor." I didn't even know Mommy had a favorite cake. I watched as the man's sturdy mule carried him down the lane. Then I ran to Señor Garcia's colmado and asked him for a beloved dulces, a handful of chiclets, and Mommy's yellow and black cake. I raced home to show Mommy the treats. Her eyes opened wide when she saw the dulces I pulled out of the bag. When I laid the cake on the table and said, "Your favorite," she grabbed my shoulders roughly. "Where did you get all this?" Her voice burned like fire in my ears. My knees began to tremble. Before I could explain about the man on the mule, Mommy dragged me across the room and out the door. "We are going down to the colmado right now to find out how you paid for this," she said. "Ana Rosa, I swear if I find you took money from anywhere, I didn't steal it, Mommy, I cried, walking as fast as I could next to her. As we walked, I told her about the man on the mule. But the more I talked, the more her face set into a mask of anger. I was scared to look at my mommy because she didn't look like herself anymore. There were no sweet smiles or gentle words. My mommy had walked straight out of herself and left behind a stranger. She was a star that had exploded on Earth and was tearing up everything in her path. When we reached the colmado, Mommy spoke so swiftly to Señor Garcia that I could hardly understand a word. For 5 minutes, the world fell around me in places I couldn't reach. I gave up trying to gather them in anything sensible. After a while, Mommy took my hand and we walked home. I knew from nothing I had been told, but from everything I could feel that our lives had been changed. Before we reached the house, I heard Papi's whistling. It was payday for Guardio, and we had been getting ready for another little fiesta. Papi was fixing up the porch with chairs. When he heard us walk up, he turned around, but as soon as he saw Mommy's face, he stopped. He stood as still as the leaves before a rainstorm. Then, in a split second, I saw my swift-dancing Papi turn into a clumsy old man. His hand reached blindly for a chair behind him. With a heavy sigh, Papi sat down and looked at us with eyes that were 2 dark holes. Suddenly, I felt very frightened. ¿Qué pasa, Mami? Papa? I asked softly. I listened as Mommy spoke, very slowly this time and very clearly, telling Papi about the man on the mule, about how this man was my father and how he had given me money and ridden off. But I already have a father, I said when Mommy finished. Right, Papi? Papi bent his head and stared into his rum bottle. Mommy wiped her hands on her dress and sat down on the porch. I had never seen Mommy sit on a porch during the day. Never in my life. That's how I knew that she was serious, that the man I was calling Papi was not my Papi. I looked at him, my dancing, smiling, ever-drinking Papi, the man who taught me to dance and who without fail embarrassed me on Sundays. The man who insisted I was his daughter. What was Mommy saying? How could the man in white sitting on top of that mule with the fancy leather saddle be my father? Mommy kept speaking, and in the background of my confusion, I heard her words telling me about one Sunday long ago when Papi went off for days drinking away all the pesos for food, and she had nothing to feed Guardio, Roberto, and Angela. What Mommy was saying, that the man on the mule gave her money, he brought her food, and then he became my father? I knew with all my heart that this day did not make any sense, but in my gut, at the very bottom of my confusion, was the fear that Mommy was telling the truth. I got up and ran, leaving Mommy and my not Papi on the porch. I went to the beach, the only place in the world for me. I walked past my friends playing at the edge, looking up the water and hunching in the trees like frogs. I passed them silently. "Where are you going, Ana Rosa?" they called out. I walked down the beach searching for the quiet, but the sound of the wind and the waves made that impossible. There was no quiet. It was as loud as if 1,000 winds were open and you could hear the voices of all your neighbors. Questions swirled around in my head, making me dizzy. If Papi was not my father, then did I still have a family? And what about Guardio? Was he my brother? I felt a sharp pain in my side, and I held my waist, bending over with the incredible feeling of loss that Guardio might not be my brother. "But he is! He is!" I shouted to the sky. I closed my eyes against the singing sun and sat down in the sand. When the sun had filled up the spaces on my skin with its heat, I stood up and walked into the water, my arms outstretched at my sides. It was so clear that I could see my shadow in the water. I was a dark cross below the surface. The beautiful clear water opened up for me and I slipped below, letting the coolness fill me up. I would never be the same Ana Rosa Hernandez again. When I finally came up for air, I turned on my back and floated, staring at the faraway sky and listening to the sea music in my ears. I wished I could stay there forever. Surrounded above and below by the blue heavens of water, a place where words did not exist. Nothing but a circle of darkness spreading inside me. For some time I floated, gazing at the sky. Then, from far away, I heard whispery words. It was a rhyme that I used to sing to my mother. "Del cielo cayó una rosa, pero no me se deshojó. Mi madre me quiere mucho, pero más la quiero yo." A rose fell from the sky, but it was not destroyed. My mother loves me a lot, but I love her more. I closed my eyes to all the blueness around me and thought about my mother, my mommy, my wash day friend, my stand up straight and never look down force, my you will write stories cariño believer. From somewhere inside myself, I knew Mommy needed me and that she had a whole bunch of words and questions fighting her like I did. And if we didn't stick together, then one dark night those very same questions would eat us up and spit our bones across the sand. But I was a writer, wasn't I? I loved words. To me, Papi was still my Papi, and words didn't have to be the enemy destroying my family. I had power over them. I could make words into anything I wanted. Not lies, not tales of sorrow, but the opposite. I could rewrite everything to make my not Papi Sunday's eyes disappear. And maybe bring my mommy's Sunday face back to him, to us. One girl's words, I thought, they can be that powerful? It was time to find out. I would write a poem, I decided, and I would give it to Mommy and Papi, and they would know then how words are everything and nothing at all at the same time. Because the man on the porch drinking his rum is my Papi, whether I like him or not, he is my Papi, and the man on the mule is a story.